Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to our random review. Today's random review, we're back to 1946, and it's Ernst Lubitsch's last film, Cluny Brown, starring Jennifer Jones. And Charles Boyer. 1946, obviously Lubitsch is another one of the many people that died way too early at the age of 55, I believe. This is the Criterion Region A Blu-ray that I picked up recently, which has the booklet, essays. There's also, it's a 4K digital restoration. There's a new conversation between critics Molly Haskell and Farron Smith-Nemi on Lubitsch's unconventional female characters. There's a new video essay by film scholar Kirsten Thompson, and there's a Lubitsch Touch, an interview with film scholar Bernard Eisenschitz, that's his name, from 2004, and there's the radio adaptation, Screen Directors Playhouse from 1950, starring Dorothy Maguire and Charles Boyer, and there's an essay by Siri Hustved in the booklet. Now this, along with just about every other Lubitsch film, is about one thing on the surface, but there's more going on underneath. Obviously you have his early work in Eureka, Lubitsch in Berlin. Obviously you have one of his masterpieces, Shop Around the Corner, which I can't find in this guddle behind me. We've got Broken Lullaby, Ninotchka, Bluebeard's Eighth Wife, Design for Living, To Be or Not to Be, my favourite Lubitsch, and one of those films that's in the argument for my favourite film of all time. Trouble in Paradise. Why doesn't Trouble in Paradise have a Blu-ray? I hear you ask. It's a very good question. So there's always something else going on with Lubitsch films, as opposed to just what it looks like in the surface. So this is the story of Cluny Brown, played by Jennifer Jones, who is staying with her uncle, and she's interested in plumbing. This film is set just on the cusp of the Second World War, and obviously women and plumbing didn't really go hand in hand. Obviously during the war that changed, and she meets Charles Boyer in fairly strange circumstances, as this chap is having a cocktail party, but his sink is blocked and he can't get a plumber on a Sunday. Charles Boyer turns up looking for somebody else, as is often the case in Lubitsch films. There's misunderstandings. The guy thinks Boyer is the plumber, but Boyer is actually a writer from Czechoslovakia who's looking for a professor. And then Jennifer Jones turns up, Cluny Brown turns up. Her uncle can't come, but she can have wants to bang her hammer on the sink, which obviously is a ridiculous concept, but Charles Boyer kind of is fascinated by this character because she's just wanting to do what she wants to do, because the film is pretty much about finding your place and finding something that makes you happy and doing that. What a ridiculous concept. And he gives a wonderful anecdote about, if you want to feed nuts to the squirrels or if you want to feed squirrels to the nuts, it doesn't really matter as long as it makes you happy, all which is put in this fairly normal, living by the book chap. Not putting him at ease at all, because he has this cocktail party featuring somebody who's very important, this woman who's very important, who doesn't just go to anybody's cocktail party. And Cluny ends up battering the sink into submission, and it drains. And they have champagne to celebrate. Cluny Brown's never had champagne, so she's a bit tipsy, and she's lying on the couch as the feeling of being a Persian cat washes over, and she acts very feminine, shall we say. And then her uncle turns up, and of course he's aghast, and he's the one that always tells her, you don't know your place, and you've got to know your place, and you'll never find your place. So again, he's very fanatical about keeping your lane, stay in your place. It's all about class, you know. So he ships her off to this country house to be a maid, so she'll actually learn where her place is. Meanwhile, the guests turn up, including this very important woman played by Helen Walker, who was the psychiatrist in Nightmare Alley, and she has kind of two suitors fighting over her, but she kind of is fairly aloof. And one of them is the son of the family that Cluny Brown is going to work for, and he admires Charles Boyer's work, because Boyer's running from Czechoslovakia, and he's trying to warn people about Hitler. Obviously there's lots of jokes as far as, you know, the British upper class not really worried about Hitler, and, you know, just because he's written a book he should just kind of sit back down again. Again, every time you kind of review a Lubitsch film, it doesn't do the film justice, because there's so many great lines, there's so many one-liners, there's so many little digs, that you just can't say them all in a 10-minute review. You have to watch the Lubitsch films to really appreciate the language, because very much like the golden age of Hollywood and screwball comedies, the language is the thing. The language is king. Not that this is really a screwball, but it just has that love of language, and there's so many just fantastic lines in the film. So to get Boyer out of London, this guy sent him to the same country house that Cluny Brown is at. The parents mistake Cluny Brown for Helen Walker, essentially, the guy's perhaps fiancée, and treat her to, you know, muffins and tea. And then of course when they realise that she's actually the help, obviously that changes. The male and female kind of lead in the running the house. The female's played by Sarah Allgood, who again, you might not recognise the name, but you'll recognise her face. She plays matrons and cooks and maids pretty much throughout her career. And the two of them just have comedy gold in their reactions, you know, and it's this idea that Cluny was actually talking to the head of the house. It's worse when the older guy in his dinner being served, and Cluny Brown actually recommends a bit of meat to the head of the house, which is outrageous. And then as the kind of the butler is recalling this to Sarah Allgood, it's like Charles Boyer actually has the nerve to talk to him as an equal, and actually have a conversation with him as an equal. I mean, it's ridiculous. So there's lots of fantastic stuff about the two of them. You know, as soon as I first met you and you were wiping the crumbs out of the mistress's bed and you were removing them crumb by crumb, I knew you were, you know, meant for service and all of that. So, you know, they're staying in their lane, and the thought of raising their head above the parapet and, like, you know, giving an opinion to the head of the house or whatever, is absolutely ridiculous. You know, the matriarch and the patriarch of the house, you know, they're not like nasty or anything, but again, it's just that obliviousness that the upper class have to, you know, the impending war and just, you know, real life, essentially. So again, as with all these other Lubitsch films, what seems like kind of good-natured comedy, there's always like something underneath about class and, you know, in this case, you know, where a woman belongs, you know, and the ability to just actually follow. If you want to go into plumbing, you go into plumbing. If you want to feed squirrels to the nuts, you feed squirrels to the nuts. Again, you can't go into all the detail. Obviously, things happen, and there's another sideline with Cluny Brown and the local chemist, again played by a familiar face, and again he's very much, you know, if you're going to be my wife, you have to stay in this pigeonhole. And then, of course, when their kitchen springs a leak, then all hell breaks loose because Cluny wants to actually fix it. So there's just lots of fantastic stuff. So you've got kind of wonderful stuff about the cusp of the war and Hitler. There's lots of jokes about that. I mean, obviously made To Be or Not to Be in 1942. There's the relationship between Cluny Brown and the chemist. There's a relationship between Helen Walker's character and Charles Boyer trying to kind of protect the young man. It's just so much fun, as with all Lubitsch films. The casting, even though you might think, oh, that might not work, you know, Jennifer Jones and Charles Boyer aren't necessarily my favourite people in the world, the same way Gary Cooper in Bluebeard's Eighth Wife might seem a bit strange, but he's actually very good in Bluebeard's Eighth Wife, because I think Lubitsch just brings that out of people. And again, it's just, there's just so much good dialogue in it. Yes, there was a time where films just had crackling dialogue that wasn't just profanity, and no offence to Dave Mamet, obviously, but it's just another wonderful Ernst Lubitsch film. Again, it's his last film, sadly, but it's not, you know, a director on his last legs that needs to retire or anything like that. I mean, he died, so obviously he would have continued to make films for, who knows, another 20 years, which is obviously a shame, but the stuff that Lubitsch has left is so wonderful, endlessly rewatchable, and obviously was a huge influence on films moving forward after his death. So Cluny Brown, another fantastic Lubitsch film, perhaps not on the level of Shop Around the Corner and To Be or Not to Be, but I mean, they're literally perfect. I mean, I don't give half stars, whatever it matters, but there's a whole bunch of these that would be 4.5 stars. They're not quite absolute perfection Lubitsch style, but they're not that far off. So thanks very much for watching this random review. Please let me know if you've seen Cluny Brown and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, saying farewell.